So let's dive right into it, I guess. I think it's fair to say that since the outbreak of COVID-19, we've had to collectively reshape our relationship with food and our understanding of how it comes to our shelves and how we source and how we consume it. And, I think a lot of us, especially here in Singapore, have experienced for the first time how empty aisles in supermarkets make us feel. And if you think about it, the impact really isn't just felt by us, the end consumer. It has almost permeated through the entire food and agricultural production and supply chain all over the world. So we want to kick off the session today by presenting some of the insights we've gathered across our research on agri-food technologies in general, and how COVID-19 has triggered a rethink of the urgencies in addressing food security and sustainability, especially in Asia. This will be led by my colleague, Victor Ng, Fundnel's Chief Commercial and Strategy Officer. I'll let Victor tell you more about himself in a bit. And in conversation with Victor, we're very happy to have Dr. Nitza Kardish, CEO of Trendlines Agri-Food Fund and Vice Chair of Trendlines Agri-Food Innovation Center. She's here today to share with us her insights and help us make sense of what the future of food and food production will look like in Asia. Victor, Dr. Nitza, thank you for your time. Victor, I'll let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Eunice. So today we're going to try a slightly new format for the Fundnel Spotlight webinar series. And what we're going to do is that we're going to talk about we're going to break down the big topic of Agrifoodtech into 5 different segments. And we're going to present just 2 to 3 slides in each segment of our own research and have Dr. Nitza really share her expert view of how the general trends and some of the questions and issues and challenges in each of these segments shape up. And we hope that this format will be much easier for you, the audience, to follow. Now, I'm very excited about today's chat with Dr. Nitza because I was a VC for the past 10 years before that in corporate finance and then also an entrepreneur. And Dr. Nitza really is the kind of investor that I enjoy talking to because she herself was an entrepreneur for many years, successfully with an exit that's quite a bit of time ago. So I think today what we'll learn as the conversation goes on is really an investor operator's view of these challenging issues in agri-food tech, right? How we can not just understand some of these trends, especially in light of the situation of COVID, but also what we can do about it as different players in the value chain, as investors, as innovators, as well as government agencies, which I think we also have on the call today. All right, so without any further ado, let me begin. So the first segment really we wanted to talk about is on the effects of COVID-19 on consumer trends. So COVID-19, I think, will accelerate developing trends in the industry. And what we see a lot of, one or two trends, or 2 of the trends that I think we see in the last 2 months having really shot through the roof in demand is food delivery and online grocers, right? And on the back of that, we see also that concepts like pre-prepared meals, which were not necessarily really in high demand before this, start to also see greater uptake. And post-COVID, we expect the consumers will continue to likely weigh the risks and benefits of going to restaurants, be a little bit hesitant about going to restaurants, and continue ordering some of these take-ins rather than going out for meals. So what that means, though, is that these new consumption trends will also lead to further evolutions in the supporting industries, right? So we have a picture here, a little bit of a cheeky picture of a restaurant in the US where they use some mannequins to kind of encourage safe distancing while keeping you company at the restaurant. So I think restaurants that used to close again, we've seen the news recently, are starting to become tenable again, but this time as online-only restaurants, right, with no physical footprints. And restaurants like these that have existing physical premises will need to reinvent the way that they use premises. Otherwise, there's really no reason, I think, in the short term that consumers will start to come out again for food in restaurants. And the other trend that we are looking at closely is whether reverse logistics will also become important for more sustainable food delivery services, because as we look at the growth of food delivery services, a lot of it is contributing to single-use plastics, to packaging that's unsustainable. So some of these industries we expect will also rise in response to these uplifts in demand for food delivery and online grocery. The other big trend, the other macro trend that we're seeing also is that concern over contamination of food sources will also start to shape consumer preferences. And trends such as alternative proteins and cell-based meats, well, in the past had already garnered some attention, for various reasons, right? Some look at it as more humane ways of obtaining protein sources. Some look at it as less pollutive sources of protein. But in the future, I think post-COVID especially, I think we're starting to have some of these ideas that the way that these proteins are produced in biosecure food supply chains will reduce the risk that another pandemic can originate from animal to human transmission. So these are just some of the macro trends that we wanted to dig up just to facilitate the conversation, Dr. Nitza. So Dr. Nitza, over to you now. What changes in consumer trends do you think will persist in the post-COVID world? And what are some other changes that you anticipate or see?
Okay, thank you, Victor, for inviting me. It is a pleasure and honor to be part of this webinar. And if I may say something in general, before we dive into the topics that raised in this part of the presentation and later on, we should remember that as COVID is a pandemic, it's big, it's all over, but it seems like humanity took care of it in a very good way, and we are managing this catastrophe in a much better way that it was in the very old time, like the Black Death and the Spanish influenza. So my suggestion in general is to not to be panic and not to take it further than what it should be. And that reflects my opinion on the trend, the current trend, and maybe the future, what will stay. I think that one of the most obvious things that happened and will happen is the fact that consumer would like to have control on everything that connected to their food. They want to have a lot of information about the preparation, about the health that connected to that consumptions. And when you have information, that will give you the sense, or maybe the illusion, I'm not sure about it, that you are controlling something in your life. So traceability, that was important before, but now it's getting and taking much more place of being very important. People would like to know where the food came from, what happened to that food along the supply chain, and they will look for nutrition and what is there. That take me to something that it was very interesting to see that during the COVID period, the search in Google for functional food that increase or support the immune system, the search was increased around 50%. So people had the willing, or they wanted to find food that will support their health and immune system. And there is nothing in the science, in my opinion, that prove that there is such a food, but there are many functional ingredients in different food that you can claim it will help people. So that for sure would increase and maybe even stay along after the pandemic. Everything that connected with personalized food that will be dominated by knowing your personal microbiome, and then combine it with, now I'm going to speak about two technology king, the AI and the big data, which can contribute to that topics as to other topics in the various field of agri-food, because it is a very powerful technologies that can change really how people consume food, how people communicate, and I'm sure that it is already implemented, but it will be much, much more obvious in the future. As you mentioned, Victor, everything that connected to alternative protein. So it will be plant-based protein, it will be insects, protein that would come from insects. Another thing that is very interesting, I think that, and that connected to sustainability as well, which is not less important. I think that technology that use nutrition from food waste will be a very interesting trend as well. You mentioned also packaging. Yeah, you know, the basic purpose of packaging is to make us wanted this product. I mean, is the visualizations. And I think that nowadays, if people will have food that package in antiviral or antibacterial package, that will even overcome the recycling parameters. So because of the fear, again, from the businesses point of view, so we spoke about restaurant, that empty restaurant. So I think that dark kitchens, meaning restaurant without people, will increase. People would like to have the ability to buy by applications, products from the grower to the end user, as we saw in Alibaba Red Mart application. And again, the implementation and adopting technologies for small holders should be increasing, but again, that will be in connection, in direct connection of cost of the technology, the friendly use, and of course the business model. And automation and robotics technology will jump, as well as other application that enable people to consume in a easy and without human hand touch on the chain. So this is in general, I believe, it's here to stay. Just to say one word about restaurant. You know, when I came to Singapore like 6 months ago, maybe more, I told people that I like to cook, and I would like to find where I can buy product and cook. And people looked at me and said, "What? Look, we have an amazing restaurant here. Why should you cook?" So maybe I was the first one to say, maybe you should cook at home as well. So, but we will go back to the restaurant, no doubt of that. We are not going to give up. No.
Well, you'll be glad to know there are now many restaurants offering ready-to-cook kits, right? So for the audience, if you don't realize it, I think Dr. Nitza is really sitting not in Singapore right now, but really joining us from Israel, right? And when you're back here, I think you'll find that the environment's changed quite a bit. I have a lot of questions based on what you said, but let's move on a little bit, and I'll save those questions for the Q&A as well. So moving forward from consumer trends, let's talk now about a little bit upstream, right? To talk about food security in Asia. And you see here the picture of Sky Greens, a startup in Singapore that specializes in vertical farming. So I think COVID-19 the pandemic has exposed the fragility of our food supply chains, right? So for a brief moment, I think we were all a little bit undecided whether to be panicked or not when we started to see photographs of supermarket shelves becoming empty, right, for the first time in many major cities. But fortunately, I think we've emerged from that quite relatively, I wouldn't say completely, but relatively unscathed, because the world has collaborated to keep the trade doors open, generally speaking, right? So compared to the last financial crisis, 2007, 2008, I think just 19 countries representing only 5% of the world's traded calories have limited exports so far. And really the rest of the world, I think, has done a good job in terms of showing solidarity, right, along the lines of what Dr. Nitza said. Now, the interesting part is, I think, pre-COVID, when you talk about issues around food security, a lot of that was concerned by around the limited amount of arable land in Asia in particular, right? Especially the countries like Cambodia, for example. Countries like that will face severe soil erosion, urban encroachment, and so on. And there are some challenges to wanting to grow the agricultural sectors in these countries with the same strategies that may have been effective in the past. But the shocks to the food supply chain that we've seen, I think, has changed the concepts around food security in this region. And some governments we know have started instituting some minor levels of export bans to maintain stockpile levels, right? And the worry, I think, is that emerging markets in particular are at risk of shortages, given that they have a lack of capacity to outbid the more developed counterparts. So a couple of questions for Dr. Nitza. What would a resilient food supply chain in the post-COVID climate challenge Asia look like? And what do you think are some of the most pressing issues that innovators and investors should tackle?
Yeah, so that's really a very accurate, description of what's happening, and not only in Singapore but in Israel as well as and all over. Yeah. At the end, bottom line, I think that at least in our place, it wasn't. We didn't face a shortage of food, but it was like for a few days. We missed a lot of product. But in general, supply chain in agriculture has one of the most complicated chain because of the requirements. Because some product, has a very unique requirements when you take it from the field or from the sea, from the region of where it produced to the supermarket or the consumer point, sale point. So some products require cold condition, other low humidity, and products that travel too slowly, they will mature and destroy before it will get to their sale point. So and there are too many factors and variables to look out for, because this interaction and interface between the different chains in the supply chain, it consists on hundreds of parameters that was developed during the years, and suddenly to say, okay, we are now want to change this part or that part. It is a dramatic change, and it has to be taking consideration all the details, how to do it, and how to do it in a way that it won't break down. So the issue of the last mile logistics is major pain in the industry, and it was already an issue before the pandemic, but this phenomenon this time made it even worse. So we have to remember that it's a big issue, and a lot of technology can implement it, but in a very conscious manner. So we, as investors that are looking for an opportunities at Trendlines, we are looking at the supply chain challenges in a few aspects, and we will be evaluating technology that enable localization of food supply chains to, you know, to shorter the distance between the product sites to the sales sites. We will look, and we already have some technologies that will keep the freshness of the products for longer time, even along the traveling or the traveling time. We do have a technology that we are now evaluating to bring to Singapore from an academia that enable transport fish in a very unique condition, that when it will get to the supermarket, it will be as if it just came out from the sea. And I think that this is something that can contribute a lot. Of course, something that everything that connected to warehousing. You know, there are so much technologies from the biological, chemical, physical discipline that can improve the way of how we are wearing our product, the food product. So a lot of knowledge and know-how of improving warehouses methodology, and no one can ignore the needs of automation and robotics, of packaging, and all other steps during the supply chain that will solve a lot of problems from the cleaning point of view of the product. And we didn't mention yet everything connected to urban farming technology that will solve few issues of the supply chain logistic. But I assume that we will touch this issue of indoor farming in the upcoming topics. But you know, a lot of people mention blockchain technology that will be important in that manner. And one of the very popular examples that we face now is the project that Cargill and Rabobank launched. They settled a $12 million commodity trade using blockchain technology, and that reducing the transactions time only to 5 days. So I think that all those technologies incorporated together will bring a lot of improvement in that supply chain challenge in the food industry, agri-food.
Great. I want to ask you about localization, but let me maybe park that question a bit later. And let's turn the topic over to bringing innovations to the market, right? Again, the little tricky picture we've put here of printing a burger doesn't work that way yet. But what we've found, I think, is that the agri-food tech industry is, one of the hardest industries really to invest in, because it takes such a long time to commercialize and has so many regulations and standards, and then issues surrounding consumer safety. And from the point at which you start an innovation, the point where there is enough production to test market traction, that's really only the start of the journey of commercialization. Because in order to produce, I think, at truly commercial scale, as Dr. Nitza mentioned earlier, it requires a disruption of age-old supply chains and policy shifts across multiple countries, right? But that said, I think agri-food tech is really one of the largest markets, huge impact, addressable market. And if you work in this area, I think that's really how you can bring impact to maybe almost everyone's life. But that said, the risk again is that unlike diseases awaiting a cure, right, to be developed, agri-food innovations often attempt to address issues that are either current or in the future, right? And these things may change, meaning to say that investments in agri-food tech sometimes are seen as riskier than in many other deep tech industries. Dr. Nitza, what are some of the interesting technologies that you think we can watch out for in particular that are maybe still the labs, and how do we help commercialize some of these technologies?
Yeah, so let me start from your second part of the question, and then I will get back to that again. You know, we are Trendlines. When we are evaluating the technology, we always very conscious about the unmet needs. So we are very much market needs driven, and if you start from there. And you're focused on something that you know that there is a problem, there is a need, somebody is looking for a solution, and you will come with the best solution that really address the very specific problem or needs. So the chances that this technology at the end will be in the market is very high, I would say. The problem that we are facing many times is that a lot of entrepreneurs, which is good, but because this is part of the journey that entrepreneurship is going, they in love with the technology. They are positive that their idea will solve the world, but they're not taking the crucial time to check what does it mean from the end user, from the market perspective. So this is basic, okay, and I will elaborate on that a little bit later on. But regarding the technology in Agrifoodtech, I must say that everything that we are looking now, we looked before also, especially our activity in Singapore, which has a unique requirements according to the to the strategic plan of food security. But these days, again, it's enlightened, and it's under the projector focus. So no one can ignore the needs of indoor farming. What we call urban farming, yeah. So in my perspective, there are two main issues there. There is the operational, all the infrastructure, light, water, regime, and of course the place where to do it, on roofs, in buildings. This part is challenging because of the cost, mainly of the cost. The other part is the variety that you can grow in indoor farming. Until now, mostly it's only green leaf. And as far as I like green leaf in my salad, it's not going to solve the problem of food security. Yeah, we can give up on that, but we can't give up on others. I'm not saying that we should, but we have to increase the cascade of crops that we can grow in indoor farming, meaning everything that has fruit. And when I say fruit, it doesn't mean apple or orange. It's also tomato or a cucumber or strawberry, because vegetables are actually, from the botanical point of view, it's fruit. But everything that we grow until now, it has the genetics and the ability to grow out, with the sun in a different condition. And suddenly we want to immigrate them to a different world. So I believe that we should and we must use genetic methods like genome editing and also the classical breeding methods, but with using, again, AI, big data, that will shorten the time from the first generation to the one that will be suitable and that can grow in indoor farming. Actually, one of our last investment in the fund, in Equinome, a company that has the technology to do that. So, and we are in an advanced discussion how to implement Equinome technology to have new crops and new varieties that can grow in indoor farming and bring and have a lot of product and in a very high yield. So I believe that for us, this part of the topics is much more interesting, and because we have the expertise and the knowledge on that. So this is one of the topics. The other one, of course, is everything, all technology that will support alternative protein trends, markets, because there are different, again, I mentioned plant-based, insect, culture meat, but part of those technologies will need a platform technologies that will support it and make it much more accessible from cost and technology point of view. We will look at the reducing use of chemicals all over the value chain from field to fork. The use of chemical is really bothering from the climate change and sustainability point of view. Regulation is there to eliminate it in a very dramatic way. And we are now at Trendlines looking at the technology that can really contribute to this mission. And one of the ways that we are helping our startups, our entrepreneurs to get to the market is by our business model of partnerships with strategic partners. We have strategic partners with Biocrop Science, with many others, that they are the market. So when you are going through the development process and get feedbacks along the way from your client, the chances that you will make a very bad mistake is lower. We will probably make mistakes because this is the way of development, but we are trying to eliminate that by contributing with our experience and with our partnerships with others that can contribute to help take a product from an idea to the market.
I'm just wondering, how receptive are these larger companies to partnerships with startups, or are they usually more keen to develop these technologies in-house?
It is a very good point. I think that it was very true a few years ago, the NIH not inventing here approach, but the last few years, and from our experience with not only one strategic partner, but with many, also in the medical side, we see that MNC understand that the level of innovation, the level of fast development out there is a treasure, and you have to be there and take advantage of that. So it's very important to create a relationships that based, of course, on trust and mutual interest. Otherwise, it won't work in business, you know, and it's good. And then you can attract the attention of the scientists, the business development, the responsible for innovation in those strategic partners, big companies, because innovation and new approaches, disruptive technology is the way to grow. And bottom line, they want to grow and be and have, you know, something that others doesn't. So I think that they shift, and nowadays it's much more friendly and open and possible to collaborate and work together to achieve the better results. Yeah.
Great. Let's move forward and discuss a little bit about investment trends in Agrifoodtech. Right. So, survey done by AgroAsia suggested that financing costs are still the biggest obstacle to adoption in Southeast Asia. I just wanted to introduce this language of upstream and downstream in the Agrifoodtech investment space, right? So on the downstream side, food delivery, grocery just now, as well as dark kitchens, online kitchens, meal kits, cloud retail infrastructure, so on. Upstream and midstream is really where the production takes place, right? So you have farm management, software, IoT, robotics, mechanization, and so on. And what we have found as well in our research is that globally, investors have largely focused on downstream investments so far, right? And but with limited arable land that will only decrease with climate change, commercializing upstream and midstream investments are really much more important when we talk about food security. And that's where we have a bit of a challenge, because if you look at this projection, we have a tremendous shortfall that is only increasing with regards to upstream and midstream investments. And the experts project that 800 billion of agri-food tech investment in Asia will be required by 2030. And we're still very, very far away from making it at that pace. So question for you, Dr. Nitza, are downstream investments overheated? And how can government investors and industry work together to spur upstream and midstream investments in agri-food tech?
It is for sure overheated. But I think that you can imagine that that will be my answer, since I'm coming, you know, from the other side of technology. I'm a biologist. I'm a plant molecular biologist. So I must tell you, my personal opinion is that all the investment that we see in the downstream, it's not agri-food tech investment. It's high tech, fintech, others. I don't think that honestly we can call it agri-food. And I'm not saying that they are not important. As we can see during the Corona time, it made, you know, all those applications became much more attractive and usable. So it has its own place, but that, as you said, is not going to solve the food security's issues. And I think that one of the most important conclusions that we faced during the COVID-19 is that food security is a national issue. So it's of course affect each one of us, but governments must be part of the solutions. Government has a lot of responsibility on bringing the right approach how to face these issues. And there is and it has to come with the private player in the ecosystem as well. So well, I can give an example from what's happening in Israel, but it is very similar to what happened in Singapore as well, and I will mention that. When you have a market failures in investments, because the investment is too, it will take a long time, a lot of resources. You know, it's not like having your return on investment in a very obvious and fast way. So the government stepped in, and that's what happened in Israel with the authority, the Innovation Authority, that really gives a lot of money to startups in those fields like agri and food, biotechnology, pharma, medical. And we can see that as well in Singapore. We, the Innovation Center in Singapore, our incubator, get a lot of support from ESG, from Enterprise Singapore. They are real partners that we're working together. Our future startups has the ability to approach and get grants, and we are very much involved in that. We had a very important delegation last year from ESG. A lot of people were visiting Trendlines offices here and also visit our portfolio companies. Ted was on our stage in the Agrivest event. So the combined partnerships between government, private is a very important to increase the investment in such important field, like you describe it as the upstream food. Yeah, we realize that solving problem of short arable land, water, at the same time taking consideration in climate change and sustainability. You know, just to say something, the effect of the climate change, not in many years from now, will be much bigger than the COVID-19. So I'm not saying that we don't have to take care of that, but we certainly have to take care of how we will produce our food and how we will grow our crops in a way that won't contribute to the damages of climate change. So one of the example that we see in Singapore is that the government is allocated a lot of money and a lot of effort in maybe change the regulation procedure and bureaucracy, because we have to shorten the time. We have to shorten the time to get a product and the technology to the market. So building parks that will contribute to the upstream producing food is crucial, and I know that ESG is very much involved in such project and others. So in order for us to really move this ecosystem to have product in the market in a shorter time, it has to be a combined and integrated program between government, private sector, industry, academia, and startups. And most importantly, I hope that private money and VCs will understand now something that we at Trendlines and some others understood a long time ago, that we have to invest in this field to make the change, to make it happen. We need much more general money to come to the industry.
Mm-hmm. I want to turn now, kind of to this example of Singapore, right? So as many of us know, I think to achieve a greater self-reliance in 2019, the Singapore government announced a 30 by 30 goal, which is trying to produce 30% of food consumed in Singapore locally, right? Which is, and this is a really high mark, given that as of 2019, only 4% of vegetables, 5% of fish, and 26% of eggs come from local sources. This ambitious goal, we think, will require huge gains in technology and human capital. If we do some simple math, agricultural land currently takes up 1% of our total land area and produces about 10% of the food demand. And if we use some simple and probably inaccurate math to reach 30%, if we do it the way that we're currently doing it, that suggests 3% is a very scarce land. And there's also the issue, I think, of human capital. I think Dr. Nitza, you shared with me before the session about agricultural high schools in Israel. So Singapore doesn't have that, obviously, right? So we lack that human capital, I think, to really make this happen, at least as of now. So question I have is Singapore's 30 for 30 goal attainable? And what cities can Singapore learn from, and is it enough?
Okay. I trust history and evidence from history. So I don't know a lot about Singapore history, but I do know that Singapore has few very ambitious and big strategic plan and goals that was achieved. And I was really amazed when I understood what Singapore did with the water resources for self-sufficiency. And at the beginning, it might, looks and that it's impossible. So I'm not saying that 30 by 30 is a simple goal, but as I said before, with the right attention and the right resources and leadership, it can happen. I think that it is probably going to happen. And just to mention, we mentioned a lot of things, but just to mention few parameters that I can see Singapore has, and can build on that. So nobody is stronger than Singapore in infrastructure. You have it so modern, so advanced, so strong. All the infrastructures in the cities is ready to have, the high-tech farms, the indoors. I'm not going specifically how to do it because I don't know, but it's there. The knowledge and the know-how, it's unbelievable high at the university, the highly educated workforce. A question if we can bring graduate students to be in love in the agri-food sector to make it much more attractive. I think that we should. Singapore is a small country with global presence, and small meaning also simply implementation. So that is an advantage. And I read someplace that Singapore have shown the highest fluid intelligence, which is really one of the most important value during evolution. If you can be an adaptive to changing situation, you probably will be succeed. So we have all that. We have a lot of knowledge in, as I said before, computer vision, AI, big data. It's there. So tissue culture. So we can take all those amazing technology, knowledge, and move it or implement it, utilize it in the agri-food tech field. It is more than important. It's crucial. It's a basic need. And as I said at the beginning, we at Trendlines realize that many years ago. And I hope that others will understand that sometimes you don't need a big catastrophe to understand the basic, and join the effort of making agri-food a very attractive field for investment. And I think that Singapore realized that before the pandemic, and will contribute a lot to make it happen.
Great. So we're going to go now to questions, and I would like to remind everyone again, you can type in your questions. Although we won't have time to go through all the questions, what we will do is that if there are any questions that Dr. Nitza can answer, we will compile some of these information and we'll send that out after the webinar today. Right, so let's start, Dr. Nitza, by maybe touching on answering this question that touches a little bit on what you mentioned about urban farming and localization, right? So I'm also very curious about how you see that, because this question, if I were to summarize it quickly, the question asker is suggesting that the challenges in the food supply chain is not really in the production itself, but it's really in the processing and the logistics. Would you agree with that? And how do you see kind of urban farming fitting in as a solution to these challenges? And if I would ask you as well, following that, do you see, let's say, for example, the supply chain, right? What percentage of that do you see becoming localized 20 years from now?
I don't have the crystal ball to give a precise answer to that, but I do think that as much as we can, grow in the local area, that will decrease the need of transportation and everything that is now an issue in the supply chain. But for sure, not everything. If we go to the very main and important crop like potatoes, rice, wheat, that has to be in an open field, and it has to be maybe far. So after harvesting, there are many steps to take care. So how to harvest, where to wear it. There are technology that can prevent, the diseases that are in the crop. But if you leave it for few days or weeks, that will destroy the crop. So a lot of effort in shelf life, but not only in the supermarket, but from the field. As I mentioned that in my previous answer, everything in the last mile of the supply chain is complicated. So we have to be aware, where is the bottleneck, where is the weak point, and how we can replace it or change it and bring something that will be much more efficient and different from what it was. But again, it has to take in consideration the path that already there, and it's for many years there. So we have to be integrated to the supply chain and not break it all over. This is my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. The next question relates to the region, right? Because we have a lot of attendees from Southeast Asia and outside of Southeast Asia today. So the question is, how can Agritech transform the agricultural industries of developing markets, such as the Philippines or Indonesia, when the adoption of tech is quite low and the cost of labor is still cheap?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, right. So for example, like some of these technologies that we mentioned about urban farming, about indoor farming, these are quite costly to implement and run, right? But when you are sitting in a country like Philippines or Indonesia, where cost of labor is cheap and it's probably easier to just run a traditional farm, how do you kind of make that, encourage that trade-off?
I think that this is a very important point in general. Even if and when, I don't say even, but when Singapore will reach the 30%, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit less, but it will be 30%. What about the other 70%? So all of us, also Israel, okay, we can be self-sufficient in vegetable and eggs and maybe fish, but all the rest. So globalization and the interactions with the smallholders all over the world and the needs to move, goods from country to country, it will stay. I think that one of the most striking, phenomena is that during the COVID, suddenly I had a feeling that solidarity died, and each one is so panicked to keep his own food, his own medical equipment. No, no, no. We have to share everything. We have to share information. We have to share food. We have to work together. What we are doing now in the last 2 months or last month, every day there are like maybe 10 webinars. If I want to join all the webinars, I stop working. But what we're doing in these webinars, we are sharing information, okay? So that will continue and will never compete, the urban farming with the smallholder that is growing and he's much more important, rice, wheat, and others. So we have to support this grower and we have to be meaningful. I mean, Singapore, Israel, and other small countries has to be meaningful in something that others will need us. So we can trade, we will give you this and you will give us that. Each one has to recognize his strengths and weaknesses, and we have to work together. Have to. There is no other way. Humanity, human beings are social creatures. And this is something for millions of years. We won't change it. Not even COVID-19. It won't change it. We're social, we need each other, and we work together.
Thank you. Well, in the interest of time, just one last question. I'll keep it a fun question instead, and it comes from me. What interesting or crazy little innovation or idea in Agrifoodtech do you think you would like to see materialize? Like, for example, for me, I think in 10 years' time, we'll have edible food packaging, right? So that's one way of solving the packaging sustainability problem. What about you? Do you have any thoughts on some crazy idea that you think will happen?
Yes, I do have, but but I think that the fact that you can eliminate cow and have milk, the same milk, so maybe one day we will eliminate the needs of mothers, but this is too too risky. I won't go for that. And regarding because motherhood, being a mother is a superpower. So maybe we can. But I think that regarding packaging, I would like to see the day no packaging at all. Food without packaging. Eliminate packaging at all. That will be great. But for that, maybe you need a very unique technology. No packaging at all.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's a even crazier idea. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Eunice. I'll turn the floor back to you, Dr. Nitza, for the exciting and interesting fireside chat today. Eunice, back to you.
Thanks, Victor and Dr. Nitza, for your time and valuable insights. And thank you everyone for taking the time to be part of today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, a copy of this recording will be up soon on our blog, and we'll be reaching out to share that with you in the next day or so. And if we didn't manage to get to your question, please hang tight. We'll curate them and try to work with Dr. Nitza or the wider Trendlines team to address your questions. Also, if you're interested in connecting with startups in the Agrifoodtech space and learning more about other deep tech sectors featured throughout Deal Fridays, please head over and sign yourself up for the next Deal Fridays session via the link we've posted in the chat. On a closing note, I'd like to encourage you to join us on Fundnel to stay updated on our upcoming webinars scheduled over the next couple of weeks. For follow-up questions or access to more information about us, please feel free to reach out. Our contact details are up on the screen. Thank you so much again, and we hope to see you again at our next virtual event. Thanks, Dr. Nitza, and thank you, Victor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.